You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Head, a Star Wars show. As you can see, I am on my own tonight, and that is because I don't actually know what happened to Daryl today. We were supposed to do the show together. You know, he let me know, like, hey, you know, I got this job today, but, you know, it should be fine. And I tried to reach him, and he wasn't there. And so, I mean, who knows? He might actually join in a little bit later. I left everything up for him, so, you know, we'll have to see. So, more than ever, I'm going to need your guys' help to get me through this one, because pretty much I wasn't prepared to do this one on my own. This is one of those that I definitely was not prepared, but I didn't want to leave you guys hanging, so you know what? We're going to do a show. So hopefully you guys can chat in. We're going to talk about this. I am actually going to pull up the article because usually, as you guys know, Daryl does that part of it. So just bear with me here. I'm going to get this thing up. And what we're going to talk about is Jedi. Really, we framed it in the top 5, but I should preface this by saying that it's actually from comicbook.com. You guys know a lot of times what happens is we see a list, we see something, you know, something that's going on the internet, right? Like news comes down or somebody writes an article or something. And a lot of times we like to discuss it because it's like, hey, this could actually be something cool for us to discuss. So we thought we would actually talk about the 5 Jedi. We put it as the top 5 Jedi, but I don't think that this is really a weighted order. I think this is just 5 characters or whatever. So we're just going to basically talk about these 5 Jedi that have very unique Force powers. And you guys have seen this a lot anyway. I mean, there has been a lot of times where, you know, I don't know, for whatever reason, you know, we've discussed the fact, let's put it this way. We have discussed the fact that there have been a lot of Jedi out there that have some really weird, bizarre Force powers, right? Like, I mean, it's one of those things where every once in a while they'll bring something out from the books or whatever. You know, a perfect example is Rey with their Force healing. You know, there's just been a lot, I think, that's been made of that. The whole Force power thing. So Ted gets us started off, by the way. He says, this is definitely a topic I am unfamiliar with, so I hope to learn a lot. Well, we're really all going to learn right there with you, man, because, I mean, to be completely honest, this is a topic that I think, and this is why Daryl and I originally wanted to bring it out to you guys, was because this is one of those topics where I honestly think that this is something that has been a bone of contention among a lot of Star Wars fans, because a lot of Star Wars fans have come out and they've said things like, hey, there's like all these Force powers that come up, right, for whatever reason. And it's really hard to say, like, why. Like, why do they end up doing this? What is the whole idea behind it? Like, why are they bringing up these Force powers? You know, why are they bringing them out? It just, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And every time they just decide to do something randomly, they bring out some new Force power or whatever, and sometimes it makes sense with the story, sometimes it doesn't. And this is one of the things that we've always said, that no matter what they do, it's fine. They just have to serve the story. All right, so with that said, there are a lot of Jedi that basically have these different Force powers, and that we're going to talk about. Some of them, I would actually say most of these guys are familiar to everybody. I don't think, there might be one on here that if you're not a fan of the High Republic, you might maybe not know who this person is. But even this character is fairly well known, even outside of the High Republic. So, with that said, we're going to go ahead and get into this list. And the first one, of course, is a character that we are all familiar with, and that is Luke Skywalker. And what they're talking about is force projection. Now, there's a couple of different times that Luke actually used this. Obviously, in the picture that you see, I had to get my hand right, over here, this is where he actually projected himself in at the end of The Last Jedi and pretty much ended up dueling Kylo. He ended up taking sustained fire from, the First Order. So it was actually, I thought, a pretty cool power. There's also the famous one, which I'm surprised they didn't really bring up. Well, I guess it was actually part of the same scene when I'm thinking about it. But obviously, we didn't know at the time that this was force projection. This ended up being something that was revealed later on, that he was still on Octo and he was projecting himself. So basically, the article pretty much is like, it's a last-ditch effort to save the resistance from the First Order on Crate. An aging and reclusive Luke Skywalker used the Force in a way never before seen in the Skywalker saga. From his self-imposed exile on Ahch-To, he projected a lifelike image of himself across the galaxy to Crate. This projection was so convincing that it was visible to others, could interact with the physical environment, and even duel with Kylo Ren. Now, what I find very interesting about this is that this is sort of the next level of what we saw Vader doing in The Empire Strikes Back. Because remember, one of the biggest things in The Empire Strikes Back was the fact that Vader could force choke from, like across the galaxy or something, right? Like he was essentially, on his ship, but he ended up force choking people different locations. This, of course, is like next level, right? This is definitely next level. And obviously it takes a lot more power, it takes a lot more strain, and it ended up basically killing him. So we know that. So I don't necessarily know if force projection is something that is only limited to grandmasters. Is this something that, honestly, it's really difficult to say, I don't know if this is something that anybody would necessarily use. It seems like it obviously takes a lot out of you. So I'm not necessarily sure how practical this thing is. But again, this is one of those unique force powers that we haven't seen. And again, as I'm talking about this, if you guys are watching it live, if you're watching this live, let me know what you guys think of each force power. Because again, I'm going to stress this. Again, I was not in any way, shape, or form prepared to do this show on my own tonight. But I did not want to cancel on you guys. I did not want to try to move it till tomorrow, because what happens if we can't do it tomorrow? And I really want to try to get back on schedule and maintain us doing this thing weekly, whether I'm, doing it on my own or not. But so just, again, bear with me. If you guys have anything you want to talk about in relation to this, as I bring up each of these force powers, by all means, do it. I'm sure this show is not going to be the usual hour-long show, although I don't know. Maybe we'll get into some crazy discussion. I've said that before. I've done 3-hour shows by myself here. So, it's possible that it could. But again, the problem was I wasn't really prepared to do this. So that's the reason why, if I sound a little all over the place, a little bit discombobulated, that's why. All right. So now the next one we're going to cover is Cal Kestis. He's at number 4. And his whole thing is force stasis. Now, force stasis is a power that essentially you can freeze people, you can freeze objects, we've seen this a little bit in the films. Kylo Ren basically froze a laser bolt like in mid fire or whatever. Um, but this isn't really they've played around with this a little bit in the sequel trilogy, but this is something that you usually see in the games. You read about it in the books. I mean, this is another one of those that I think honestly I like the fact that it's been brought into the films to a degree, and I like the fact that it's being brought more into canonical material. But this is one of those force powers that, when we were talking, I forgot which show it was. It was one of the last few shows. And we were talking about the convenience of it, right? The storytelling. And how there's a lot of situations where the Jedi should, if this were real life, actually use these powers. But for some reason in the story, they don't. And of course, the reason for that is because, you need to create some conflict, you need to create some tension. But I mean, it's really difficult sometimes because, especially people like us, the type of people that will watch this show, we know. A perfect example is the Phantom Menace. You find out that Jedi can do this force speed thing. And you're sitting there thinking, like, they probably should use that power a little bit more often. Now, I know you can come back and say, well, it takes a lot of power and on it goes. But, I mean, there's a lot of times where they should be able to sense this stuff. For instance, when the fish attacked them, when they were in that submersible, why didn't they sense the fish? They can sense anything else. And, of course, the obvious answer is because, the story calls for it. I mean, if the Jedi were to actually use every power they truly have at every moment, there wouldn't be any tension. I mean, it's only the Yuuzhan Vong or some enemy like that where they're unaffected by the Force. You would have to do something like that because otherwise you run into the Superman problem. But this Force stasis thing, I actually think is a cool power. Now, on comicbook.com, their whole thing is it's an advanced form of telekinesis that requires a Jedi to have near perfect control and concentration. He'd use this ability to stop incoming blaster bolts or freeze multiple enemies at once, and it's particularly helpful when it comes to giving Cal and his team a tactical advantage in combat. Unlike the common use of telekinesis, though, which is mostly just pushing or pulling objects, force stasis requires Cal to project his own will on his target at a molecular level. Now we're getting into sci-fi, bringing the target's movement to a complete standstill. This power, along with his psychometry ability, solidifies Cal's place as one of the most influential Jedi of his time with an understanding connection of the Force in all living things. Now, the interesting thing about this to me, and again, I mean, we can go in depth on this if you guys want to, but this is one of the things that I find really fascinating, and that is that unless you have extensively played the Fallen Jedi Order video games or whatever where Cal is, you probably don't know too much about him, but he is being brought slowly into canon. He's made an appearance in some novels, I think. I haven't read any that have him in it, but I heard that he was actually going to be brought in possibly to the animation or live action. We'll have to see. Ted mercifully chats in. Thank you, Ted. Good connection between Luke's force projection with Vader's long distance force choking. Well done. Well, thank you. I mean, look, sometimes we don't remember names of characters or anything like that, but we do like to believe that we really get in depth in some of this stuff. And there are a lot of connections that you can make with this, right? I mean, obviously, force healing, which I don't actually believe is on this list, believe it or not, but force healing was something that we saw even all the way back to the expanded universe, and it's been brought into primarily the sequel trilogy, but you're starting to see it pop up everywhere now. So there's a lot of connections that you can make between some of these things, because if you think about it, there is a list, and I think we did a show on it once where there was some insane amount of force powers. But really, when you break it down, it only falls into a few different categories, right? I mean, there's physical manipulation, which would be like force choking, telekinesis, that kind of thing. There's psychological manipulation, which would be like the Jedi mind trick. Um, there's a few others that are like that, where Kylo's thing. Um, Maybe it's called psychometry. I'm trying to remember. I think it actually is on this list, by the way. There's a lot of different force powers, but they generally fall into maybe one of two or three categories. So when you look at, again, force projection, force choking. Now, force choking, obviously, you're manipulating the force from far away, but it's a little bit more of a more basic use. I mean, don't get me wrong, you still have to be insanely powerful to pull this off, but it's still a more basic use when you compare it to the likes of force projection. Force projection is a whole nother level. And to my knowledge, I think Luke is the only one who was able to use it. I don't know if Yoda's ever tried. I mean, Yoda kind of tried. I mean, I do seem to recall that there was an episode of the Clone Wars, I think, or it might have been Rebels. It actually might have been Rebels. One of you guys out there can connect or correct me. But it was when he actually projected himself. I forgot which character it was. I think it was when they were doing the trials or something. So he used force projection technically as well. But when Luke did it, I mean, he was holding the dice and he gave them to Leia. He's dueling Kylo. I mean, there was a pretty big use of it. And then when you get into things like what Cal Kestis is doing with the force stasis, a lot of the things that he had pulled off in the video games were, again, an extension of what we've seen Kylo do in the films. And sure, you can write whatever you want, so things can come into the novels that you couldn't possibly film. Although now it would be easier, but especially at the time the expanded universe was written, there's a lot of these force powers that you could dream up, but it would be very difficult to convey that in any kind of a visual medium other than maybe animation. Whereas, with the video games and all that, sure, you can have these guys. I mean, look at the Force Unleashed. You basically had Starkiller like pulling down Star Destroyers or whatever. Well, that wasn't going to happen before. But then again, we saw Rey in The Rise of Skywalker was like pulling down. She ended up pulling down, or at least stopping that one ship that she thought Chewbacca was on. So again, you're starting to see this happen more and more. It's just a little bit more rare, though, that a lot of these force powers are going to make their way into the public consciousness, right? There's a lot of really weird random ones. The ones that we're covering today, they're unique, but again, they're tied to a character. So it would be easy for them to basically incorporate it into something. And another direction that we could basically go with this too is, look, should they bring a lot of these powers in? You can make the argument that maybe not. Maybe it might be a little bit unrealistic to start bringing in a ton of different force powers or everything, because you do fall into the trap of you have to write around that, because you start bringing in force powers where these Jedi could do what they could truly do, or what they should be able to do. Well, now you have a problem, because what kind of a villain are you going to write for them? What kind of a situation are you going to write that's going to cause tension? For every Jedi that you start to increase in power, you then have to increase the villain in power as well. Now you could say, well, wait a second though, what about Thrawn? Because Thrawn was a big villain for the Jedi especially in the expanded universe. And that's true. You could make that argument, but the thing is, you had to give him super intellect. The other thing was he had those creatures, the Asalamari, that he put on himself that basically surrounded him in a force bubble, and it basically rendered him impervious to the force. So, I mean, I'm not sure if that exactly. I don't remember. It's been like 30 years since I read those books, but I think even things like the Jedi mind trick and things that were a little bit more, um, mental. I don't think that those would even be affected on him, but certainly any of the physical stuff. Or you have to go in the other direction, right? You have to create the Yuuzhan Vong. Well, these guys are just from a region where the Force doesn't even really exist, and so they have like this natural immunity to it. And that was really good storytelling too, because the Empire, or not the Empire, but the New Republic, anytime they would face some sort of insurmountable threat, what would they do? Oh, well, we'll just call Luke. you know, we'll get Luke and the Jedi, and then they'll dispatch them. And so you have to do that, because otherwise what you're doing is you're just creating more and more powerful villains to match your more and more powerful heroes. And I mean, pretty soon you run into what everybody calls the Superman problem, which is like, now you're basically having gods fight each other, right? Because they're just so immensely powerful. And if you think about it, what was Superman fighting in the beginning? He was fighting bank robbers. But, there really wasn't a whole lot of interest there. That's why they had to create the kryptonite thing. It's like, okay, well, there's a weakness. There's something, again, there's a foil for him, right? And it's basically the same thing with the Jedi. I mean, they don't have a kryptonite per se, but I mean, there are things in that are naturally impervious. You have the Beskar armor that's impervious to lightsabers. You have, certain. You have, like I said, those creatures, the Asalamari, that create a force bubble. So you're able to write around some of these problems. But that's why I say that really they should try not to overpower the Jedi too much. That's one of the criticisms that people actually did have about the expanded universe, is that Luke in particular became pretty much a god. There almost was nowhere to go. It's like, well, this guy can pretty much take out anything in the universe. So it's by himself, mind you. So what do? Right? And that's the problem. All right. So let's move on to our number 3. Our number 3, this is one, of course, that has been controversial in the past, but it's something that we all know. It's just something that I think that it still hasn't been explained as thoroughly as it should have, or as often as it's used. And that is Force Ghost. Now, in the comicbook.com article, if you guys go and you read that, there's actually a discrepancy in this, because they call it immortality. The only reason why I changed the name to Force Ghost is because essentially that's what it is. But again, they're not really immortal. I mean, I guess it really depends, because I don't remember anything. If you guys do, chat it in or write it in the comments or something. I don't quite remember if it was something that they actually expressly say in the new canon. But I do remember in the expanded universe, one of the things that's brought up is that the Force Ghost thing is limited. So they do have essentially eternal life in the Force, but the problem is that they can't maintain that. They can't maintain a somewhat physical manifestation of themselves indefinitely. But that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case, at least of anything we've seen in canon, right? And so Qui-Gon, being our number 3, it's kind of funny that they put him simply because he's the guy that figured it out. So let me just read this one real quick because this will give us a little bit of insight. He says, while not a unique power in the traditional sense, Qui-Gon was the first Jedi to discover the secret to retaining one's consciousness after death. After his mortal form was killed by Darth Maul and Naboo, and of course we all know this, he was able to merge with the Force and return as the very first Force ghost. So he's the first guy. Now, I often wonder if they're going to bring the whole Sith spirit thing in, because that's another expanded universe thing. It's a little bit different from a Force ghost, but it's kind of similar. But it's a little bit, I think that there's a limited shelf life, especially with the Sith spirit. Now, we do see that a little bit with Palpatine. That is true. So going on with Qui-Gon, it says, at first he only appeared as a disembodied voice to his former apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi from beyond the grave. However, the closing moments of the Obi-Wan series, he revealed his spectral form. The ability to live on through the Force on the physical plane was previously considered impossible by the Jedi Council, as they believed the only way to become one with the Force was to just surrender to its will completely. However, Qui-Gon's mastery of this and pretty much melding with the living Force, right, was a key that allowed him to retain his individual identity. He later passed on this knowledge to Yoda and Obi-Wan, following them also to manifest as Force ghosts after their death. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. And this is a thing that I'm not sure, and then Ted chatted in something else. I want to get to that too. But the interesting thing about this is that, in a way, Obi-Wan, not so much Yoda, but Obi-Wan followed that same path. Because if you remember when he was struck down in A New Hope, he too first appeared as a disembodied voice to Luke in the X-Wing. Now, it would be perfectly valid to argue, well, he's not gonna, manifest himself like straddling the front of this thing, right? I mean, that makes sense. But it is worth noting, though, that it basically follows the same trajectory, that he's kind of a disembodied voice. And then, interestingly, when he appears to Luke on Hoth, he's there, but he's kind of not there. He's really fully manifested once Return of the Jedi hits, and he's fully walking, and he's sitting on the log and everything else. So that really begs the question of, is this something that, okay, you know how to do it, but you have to practice it? So in other words, is this, okay, he taught Obi-Wan the whole thing, so Obi-Wan was able to do it, but is it still stages? In other words, do you start out as kind of a disembodied voice, and then you can start to physically manifest yourself, and then eventually you can fully interact with the physical world? That seems to be what happened. But, again, a lot of it you do have to chalk up to, hey, this is, the technology of the time. I mean, I get that. I get that there's the real world elements of filmmaking that influenced a lot of these decisions. But being who we are, we got to find an in-universe explanation for everything. All right, let's get to Ted's chat here. He says, I like seeing clever uses of the base set of powers instead of inventing new, heretofore unheard of powers that take them to a level that's too powerful for writing practical adventures. Look, I couldn't have put that any better myself. I'm right there with you, man. I say, look, just come up, first of all, with good stories. Give me good plots. Just do that. Okay? And number one, I'd be happy. But secondly, it's true. You don't have to bring in a lot of these powers that will later paint you into some sort of a corner. Just give us clever, good in-universe uses for a lot of these basic powers. You don't have to go crazy with it. But again, I could also argue that if you have pretty much this all-powerful Force, and the Jedi are manifesting it, you could say, okay, these Jedi are pretty much limited only by their own mastery of this unlimited power. So, what then separates each stage of, a Padawan to a knight to a master to a grandmaster? You could say it's the command and the use of even some of these basic powers, but it stands to reason that if you're really studying the Force and you're going all in on this, then maybe there are more powers to be had. And I'm even okay with that. I mean, I like the way that the hierarchy hits, right? I mean, for instance, we know that the Jedi specialize in defense. Okay. When you are at the lower level of being a Force user and a Sith, for instance, hits you with Sith lightning, you're just done, right? You just get blown back and you're incapacitated. You get a little bit better, maybe a higher end knight, maybe a master. Now you can start deflecting it with a lightsaber, like Obi-Wan did in Attack of the Clones. Then, when you get to your more high-end master, grandmaster level, that's when you're much like Yoda. You can actually just use your hands. You can basically use your own personal force to absorb the lightning without the use of a weapon or something to discharge it. So that's a good example of you're not necessarily giving these guys outlandish, crazy powers, but you are giving them definite leveled uses of those powers. Something like the Jedi mind trick, right? It only works on the weak-minded or whatever, but the stronger you are with the Force, the more you can inflict your will. Now, again, that's something that a Sith might do. A Jedi might not necessarily do it, but, this is something that definitely, I think, you can play around with. You don't necessarily have to bring in a crazy amount of Force powers or just really outlandish powers in order to demonstrate the levels of mastery of the Force. I think it's probably the best way to put it. Okay, let's go to our number 2. Number 2 is the person that I said, yeah, some of you might not know. A lot of you guys, though, that are actually a little bit, you're not casual fans. Maybe you're not hardcore either. I think you might know this character. If you're hardcore, you definitely know this character. And this is a High Republic character, and this is Avar Kriss. And her power is the Song of the Force. Now, I remember reading this in the High Republic novels and being very fascinated by this, because this is, in my opinion, probably the most unique of all the Force powers. If this were a weighted list, I would probably put her at the top, to be honest. Now, granted, I mean, there's probably some people that aren't covered in here because, like I said, if you actually go to like StarWars.com and look up Force powers or go to the Wikipedia, you'll see like a gang of powers. I honestly believe that Daryl and I did a show on it once. You can go back and look, maybe like, Force powers or something, do a search. I'm pretty sure that we did one. I know we did one on the 7 styles of lightsaber combat, but I'm pretty sure we did one on Force powers. And Daryl's here. Look at that. I knew he texted, but I wasn't sure. Hang on, let me unmute your mic. There you are. All right, I'm on number 2.
Yeah, so I see. I was actually here at the tail end of the whole Yoda thing that you were saying, but
well, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, actually, first of all, sorry guys, terribly late, coming back from an event.
Hey, but you're here.
It's
That's
been a crazy day. Yeah, I know, right? But anyway, to your point, yeah, I think with Yoda and the ability to absorb Force lightning and all those types of things, I think those Force powers are great and they're cool, and but we would love to probably see more of an expansion of those, just because we know that these Jedi, especially when you talk about Grandmaster level, the Jedi Council, those guys are like your upper echelon, your top tier. So we kind of want to see at least more from them when it comes to stuff like that, as far as like the abilities, or even so like not even struggling so much with using it. I brought up, I think, on the last show about how when Dooku dropped that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a considerable sized, uh, I guess, beam or whatever he was trying to drop on Obi-Wan, and Yoda had to catch it. And I think, he was partially catching it because I think he was caught off guard a little bit by it, and he kind of had to react quickly. But it just seemed like he was struggling a little bit. But then eventually he was able to kind of just toss it to the side, which was practical. But when we see those Star Wars shorts where, you know, he could take a battalion of those little battle droids and him just wave his hand and they all go flying like 100 feet. That's the kind of stuff that, I think we would love to see in some aspects.
Right, and that goes along. I don't know if you saw Ted's other comment. Let me actually put it back up. He says, I like seeing clever uses of the base set of powers instead of inventing new, heretofore unheard of powers that take them to a level that's too powerful for writing practical adventures. And that basically goes along with what I was saying before, which is,
Yeah.
you end up with the god. Yeah, because you have
Yeah.
to consistently keep creating more powerful villains. And, it's like at some point, I mean, it just basically loses its practicality. I mean,
Sure.
it would be a lot better to temper that. And you said you caught the tail end. I mean, I was basically talking about if you just go into the mastery of some of these base level powers, because
Yeah.
obviously, with the Jedi, it's going to be like, it's going to be limited on their mastery. I mean, the Force itself is unlimited, but they
Right.
are going to be limited by their own mastery of the Force.
Right, because they only go so far. Because, and you were bringing up this point, which, up until now, I really didn't think about it. But I don't know if you knew this, and or this is kind of a unintentional thing, where um Jedi mind trick, right? We know they can use it on the weak minded, but then you look at someone like Kylo, where he can almost like force things out of you in a way.
Yeah,
So I
right?
don't know if that's like almost like a dark side version of the Jedi mind trick, if
Well,
that makes
kind
sense.
of. Basically, what I said, it's funny. This is probably like maybe 2 or 3 minutes before you jumped on, but I said that that's an example of maybe it's not even such a dark side thing. Maybe it's just a strength thing, because like you said, it works on the weak minded. Stronger minded you are, it doesn't work. But if you're extremely powerful in the Force, then you could probably override that. Now, I did point out, as you just did, that a Jedi wouldn't do that, right? That's more of
Right.
an
It's too
offensive.
aggressive.
Yeah, it's an aggressive use of it. But
Right.
it did go into my example of, just leveled up. I mean, the example that I gave was, okay, you have a Sith shooting Force lightning at you. If you're a Padawan low end knight, you're probably just going to get blown out and that's it, right? But if
Right.
you're maybe, higher end knight, low end master, okay, now you're going to be able to block it with your lightsaber like what Obi-Wan did.
Hmm.
Okay, well, if you're like kind of a higher end master or a grandmaster, now you're going to do what Yoda did and you're going to be able to block it with your own body, essentially, right?
Right.
Like you can
Like
concentrate it in your hand.
self-absorb it. Yeah.
Right. Now again, this is a perfect example of showing mastery of the Force without having to bring in all these crazy outlandish powers. Let me ask you this, because I was talking about this and I can't remember. I could have sworn, didn't we do a show on all the weird Force powers?
Yes, we kind of did. We covered some of them. Some of the rarely the
Yeah,
excuse me.
there was like a whole list or something that we found, and we're like, oh, this is
Yeah, we
weird. We got to
found,
do a show on it, and so we did.
yeah, it's like it was crazy. It's like maybe 50 or 60 something crazy like force powers
Right,
that,
and I think
but
we
then
whittled it down or something.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought so.
But yeah, and I mean I like the current use of some of the things some of them are on our list. Like with Ray, we saw with the Force healing. We've heard about it, but we've never really seen it. So I think that was cool. And once again, I think to Ted's point, that's a practical use. Someone gets injured in battle, or in the sense of with Kylo, I think it was a clever way. That's one thing I will give the sequel trilogy is finding a way to get Kylo to turn to the light. And it's like, how do you do that? And with him already fighting against the light side anyway, like you always said, Eric, that's something we've never seen in a Star Wars, actually anywhere, where most of the Sith Lords are fighting against the light. We always find our heroes fighting against the dark. But then when you couple that with Rey, imbuing him with light side energy, with force power, force healing, it's a light side, ability that kind of like pushed him over the edge, along with, of course, being visited by dear old dad. I think all those things combined, which was a clever way, because I remember at that time we were like, how do you redeem him after killing Han? Like, that was one of our big things.
Yep, I remember.
And that was a very clever way of doing it. So, and I never thought about like force healing would not only just heal the wound, but it also kind of would push someone who's maybe a little bit darker, give them some of that little, positive vibes that people will say.
Well, I mean, and the thing is, it's also like there's certain extensions too, right? Like one of the things I brought up earlier that Ted actually liked was the fact that when I was talking about Luke and the force projection, we saw a lightweight version of that when Vader was actually choking people from his ship, and everybody else was somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's like that was like the more embryonic stages of it. And
you gotta wonder, like, what's his range on that? Like,
yeah, I know.
Like, how far can that?
That's exact. I guess the range probably is as long as you can feel them in the force, you can choke them.
Yeah, I mean, but that's another thing too. It's like, do you have to visibly see them, or do you? Because every time he did it, he saw them in some way, whether it was a hologram or
well, and I think he did that more
screen.
for like he was just trying to talk to him, be like, okay, you failed me for the last time, and then chokes him out. Whether he needs to do that, I don't know.
That's the question, right? I mean, you need to have that.
That's information. But the force projection is kind of like the ultra level of that, right? Because now you're projecting a physical manifestation of yourself.
Right.
That's a little bit different. Well, I was in the middle of talking about our number 2 of our Chris, who is, does this Song of the Force thing.
Yep.
It allows her to sense the Force's intricate connections among all living things, seeing them as a complex symphony. And then, of course, she can use that to pinpoint a specific person's location, or on a larger level, the harmonic force bond between multiple Jedis and their minds. Now, you've read enough High Republic stuff that you were exposed to this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this one I always found
the twins would.
Well, they were kind of like the typical, when you prick one person, the other feels the pain. That's almost like a mono.
That's what. Okay, yeah.
This one,
but yeah,
she
I do remember that.
Yeah, she uses it. So she uses it not every time, but she does use it to keep track of where everybody is. She, the only times that she's ever used it as like I guess like weaponized it maybe is when, maybe the what was it, the Dangir, those like really weird plants.
Oh, the Dringir. Yeah, she did it as a sonic thing.
Well, she did it to unite all the Jedi's powers and then project out or something. But for the most part, the fact that comicbook.com describes this as a symphony is a really good description, actually, because it's sort of like everybody has their role in the Force, and she can basically see that. And,
she's a conductor of it.
Yeah, and sort of like lock into that. And that's a really interesting. I actually said to the audience that this is probably the most unique one on the list.
Of all, yeah. I would definitely agree.
That this one pretty much is the one that's like, okay. The other ones they're unique, but other people, like, I mean, okay, Qui-Gon, sure, he was the first person to get being a Force ghost, which I changed the name from immortality because, as I pointed out, not sure where canon stands on this, but at least in the expanded universe, there was a shelf life for being able to manifest yourself physically. So nothing has contradicted that yet. So I hesitated to call it immortality, but it's a Force ghost thing, and it was interesting too because I also pointed out the fact, and I mean, not to redo the entire show here, but I also pointed out the fact that much like with Qui-Gon, he started out as a disembodied voice and then eventually manifested himself physically. Obi-Wan kind of did the same thing. He was a disembodied voice on the X-Wing, and yes, I pointed out to the audience, like, I didn't expect him to straddle the front of the thing or anything like that. So, I mean, obviously, in that situation, the disembodied voice actually made sense. But it should be noted, again, that he was a disembodied voice, and then we saw him kind of half physical, half spirit in The Empire Strikes Back. And then by Return of the Jedi, now he's like walking around, sitting on a log. He's actually physically interacting with his environment. So there seemed to be, somewhat of a track there. But, I found that to be pretty interesting, actually. But when you actually look at this whole, like, Song of the Force thing, I mean, that's, that's like kind of next level. Like, that's definitely a different thing, different vibe altogether. All right. So our number one actually goes to a guy that we've been talking about a lot over the last few weeks, actually. He's like appeared in every list I think we've done. And even though this one's not our list, here he is, good old Quinlan Voss, Force Psychometry. So basically what this is we saw a little bit of this actually with Rey in The Force Awakens. So basically what you can do is you can touch an object and then you can sense memories or, things like that pretty much happen. Right? So it's kind of like a unique version of Force Sight or something. So, I mean, this one's pretty cool. And I would say, okay, this one gets a good unique thing too. I would say these top two are very unique.
Because Quinlan Voss was a very good tracker, wasn't he? Like, that was part of one of his things.
Yes.
And he used that a lot when he was, of course, tracking, people, or, he would touch the ground or he'll touch objects, and almost like kind of get a scent off of it. Essentially, we saw that in because he did appear in the animated series where he did that. Was that Clone Wars?
It had to have been.
I want to say I think it was a Clone Wars episode because it was dealing with the Hutts, if I'm not mistaken. And he was.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
Remember
actually.
that one?
Yeah, I do. Now I do.
And he was like he was trying to find somebody. I don't know if it was one of the Huttlings or it might have been Zero or something, like was escaping or something like that. And he basically was like using his tracking skills because that's the first time we ever saw this version of him.
Yeah, I forgot about the tracking
in animation.
Thing. Yeah. Wow. No, and because the thing about him, and you really get this sense more from the books and a little bit with the comics than you do anything else, because he's only name dropped in episode 3. But he's actually a super powerful Jedi. Yeah. Well, he wasn't. It was Sifo Dyas. That was the one from 2. But yeah, Quinlan, he's one of those guys that you talk
Sifo
about a
Dyas
character.
Was his master, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, maybe that was it.
Sifo Dyas was his master.
Yeah, maybe that was it. Well, I mean, the thing is, he's one of those guys that is just begging to be brought into the proper canon in either a movie or animated series or something.
Yeah, because like you said, he was first mentioned in episode 3, but then he was mentioned again in the Obi-Wan series
Oh, that's right.
with the path,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He was.
the whole path thing. Yep.
And of course, he was actually in the Clone Wars series, and
Hmm.
he would have been in season 6 if
Yeah.
that whole
Had
like
it.
Disney sale thing didn't go through. So yeah, I mean, I actually think that that's a character, and kind of fits because the last show we just did was characters that deserve their own show or whatever. But
Hmm.
even apart from that, I would say, and I think that was actually one of the responses that you had on that too when I brought up Quinlan Voss. You agreed, and then you basically said, well, even if he didn't have his own show, he basically needs to be brought into a show or a movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Like even if he's not the guy, it's not Quinlan Voss' Star Wars story. It's it's like, I mean, at
Yeah, if
least
you
bring the guy in, right?
yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're covering that time period where um I would say anything after, well, essentially you can almost say anything after Revenge of the Sith, but um that whole period of time between that, the Obi-Wan series, Bad Batch, that whole um time frame is where I think he would really be prevalent, because that's where he was helping a lot of the renegade Jedi, where they're now deemed renegades by the Empire now. And he was kind of helping them escape. So if you're
Yeah,
dealing
because
with
I'm
things that
looking.
are going on in that time period, that would be, he would be a great focal point, or a great focal point, or even at least a great, I don't want to say side character, but you can definitely do some side quests with him.
Well, the other thing too is that his fate. I just double check because I mean it's tough to keep up with all these canonical changes that they're making, but especially
Right.
in light of Asajj Ventress.
Yep.
But so I just did like a quick thing real fast and a quick search, and basically, yeah, he. I mean he hasn't died. I mean, we assume he's probably dead by the sequel trilogy. Just
Hmm.
given his age, who knows? But the point is, it goes to your point though, because you could do a lot with this guy. I mean, he obviously survived the original trilogy. He might have even survived a little bit beyond that. So it's not
Hmm.
like some of these characters where it's like, oh, they were killed like, 4 weeks before A New Hope or something. I mean, it's, like
Yeah.
Andor. You take somebody like
I was just
Andor.
about to say that,
I
like,
mean, yeah.
yeah, like the whole cast of Andor, for
Yeah,
example.
right. Like right, pretty much. But even Andor as a character, you go, okay, I love this guy. I want to make more movies on him. Fine, but when they have to end, it's like you're not
Yep.
making anything. I mean, unless they maul the guy and he ends up with like, well, I mean, I don't know. He's pretty much vaporized. It's not like you could just throw another pair of legs on him and he's good to go. I mean,
You're
he
trying these
was
on for size.
yeah, he was pretty much obliterated on what was it? What planet was that? Oh. Oh. What planet was
Scarif?
it? Yes, Scarif. Thank you.
Scarif.
So yeah, I mean, but there's a lot of these people that they could actually do. And that's one of the things that really bothered me I think about the Acolyte was okay, they brought in one High Republic character that we kind of know, but to me it was a missed opportunity to bring in more. And they're trying to create all these new people with these new powers and all that, and it just I don't know, I just think that it's like, look, just you have a good base set of powers and you could play with the levels at which each character has mastered those powers. So that gives you your variety, and then
Hmm.
you created a bunch of really cool characters. Do something with them. Because I
Yeah.
mean, when you're dealing with like, okay, these are the 5 Jedi, that have these unique force powers. Okay, cool. I mean, I don't know. You can you can make the argument that some of them aren't terribly unique. I mean, let me just run down this list again. Um, just you know. Also, you can comment on anything too. Force projection. All right, that's unique.
Yep.
That's definitely a unique thing. Force stasis. Man, got that tickle in my throat. That's unique. Kind of. The only person we've seen other than Cal use it though is Kylo.
Oh, is that when he like with that blaster bow when he held it in place?
Yeah. Because pretty much
Yeah.
like Cal's thing, and again, you could do this in the video games, right? Where, but essentially you freeze everybody. And Kylo did that too. He froze what was it now? I remember him doing it. I just don't remember like if it was either in the throne room when he was fighting people, or if it was also when he did that blaster bolt thing. But either way, we know that Kylo definitely possesses that ability. And of course, that's Cal's thing. So you could say, okay, this one's somewhat unique too. So far we got 2 out of the 5 that are unique. This one, I guess you can make the argument that it's unique, considering we've only seen a few people do it. But then again, now you get to the Rise of Skywalker, you got everybody chiming in. It's like, I mean, you got like 50 different Jedi basically like
Talking to Ray.
And saying their thing. So I mean, it's like, okay,
She's
well,
like
how
schizophrenic. It's like for schizophrenia all of a sudden.
exactly? It's like, were they really there? I don't know, but I mean, that's the thing. It's like, okay, how unique is it if like every Jedi in the universe eventually got the memo?
And thinking like,
and how did Mace know how to use it?
That's what I'm saying. Like, so here's my thing.
No.
Man, I'm wondering.
Sense of conversation.
I won't try to belabor the moment. I know it's a little bit.
No, I mean it's fine. You got to get your money's worth here.
But okay, so Luke, we saw him in Empire, right? He's training with Yoda. We know he left, went fought Vader. He did come back, finish his training. Now you gotta wonder, like in that time, Yoda must have told him just in case, on the all chance you die, you could come back as a Force Ghost, because one, Luke didn't look bewildered by it when it happened. When Yoda died, it was kind of like, oh, this must be what he was talking about. Because you gotta think about it. Like anybody normally who die around you, there's a body there. He completely vaporized, like he just disappeared. And Luke was just kind of like,
well, the thing is, and this
he wasn't.
This is the thing that goes in with the whole like Obi-Wan thing in a way, right? Where I remember that whole scene at the end of Attack of the Clones, I think it was, where it's basically, or no, actually it was the end of Revenge of the Sith, where he's like, more training have I for you or something, and it's kind of like, the implication obviously was, hey, Qui-Gon figured out a new thing, so we all kind of learned it. Okay, fine, you're right. That covers Obi-Wan, that covers Yoda, that covers obviously Qui-Gon. With Luke, first of all, they're taking a big risk because they didn't have time to teach it to him before he went and fought Vader the first time. So,
exactly.
They're kind of lucky that Vader didn't.
He couldn't even lift the ship out of the pond.
Well, that's true. I mean,
the
Force Ghost thing might have been the advanced level. Like, all right, man, you can't even lift.
It's graduate studies,
right? So that's a good point. He probably wouldn't have been able to do it even if they had taught him. So they're just, everybody pretty much is lucky that Vader just was messing with him, only chopped his hand off and didn't actually kill him. However,
Obi-Wan has to be in the Force looking at that, like watching them fight. He's like, good, okay, nice. Just okay.
Well, if they were both, my thing, it's actually funny you bring that up, because one of the things that I always laugh to myself about is if, Yoda and Obi-Wan are watching that, and
Mhm.
every time Vader goes, Obi-Wan has taught you well, and Yoda's like, what? No.
But yeah, I mean, like, so okay. Now I can get with the fact that like when, like I said, when Luke came back to finish his training, of course we don't know how long that took, but obviously he became way more powerful. And so when Yoda finally, and he must have gone back probably a couple of times, right? But when he does go back after,
Yeah, I don't know.
after they rescue Han.
That's like that's sort of a, from what I understand, that's actually canon, is that he goes back, because the whole thing between, the whole Empire Strikes Back thing, that was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks or something. And then supposedly he had gone back. But the problem that I have with that is that during Return of the Jedi, he's like, hey, I've come back to finish my training, which would imply that he didn't come back until that moment. And that's because
Well,
that's when Yoda says, already know what you need, or, what in that Yoda speak that he does.
yeah. Well, I think it just depends on a certain point of view, because it could be one of those things where he came back, got some more training, went out, did some more missions and stuff like that, and then come back again for some more. And he's just like, look, I mean, you're pretty much there, dude. I don't, you have everything you pretty much need to kind of carry on. My thing is, Luke, like I said, he wasn't surprised when Yoda vanished, when he gave himself up basically to the Force. And then he probably had to have asked Yoda about this, because, like, okay, I
Well, with
watched
the
Obi
Ben
Wan
thing,
get
right?
cut down
Yeah,
by. Well,
right.
I watched him get cut down by Vader. Yet he's popping up on this log talking to me. Okay, you got to explain this to me.
Well, when he
Like,
popped
how
up
does
on the
that work?
log, yeah, I mean, when we see him sitting on the log, though, that was after Yoda died, because that's when, he was talking about, hey, why didn't you tell me about this whole, Yoda mentioned
Oh,
another.
right. The first time it was just a voice. The first time
Yeah.
in Empire it
Well,
was
he
just a
was
voice.
he was there. It was like, I mean,
No, he popped up again because he right
he
before he got on the ship.
yeah, he popped up, right. But for the
Right.
most part, it was a voice. And then he kind of pops up after Luke's in the cockpit, basically, and
Hmm.
does his thing. We don't actually see Obi-Wan like walking through the forest and sitting on the log and all that till after Yoda had died. And now
Right.
Luke's like, hey man, I got some questions about this. Yoda said there's another.
Yeah. Right.
Like, if
Exactly.
there's another, why don't we train in that person that they can go help me? Why do I have to face him?
Exactly.
Like, I'm facing Vader and the Emperor, dude. You couldn't even face one. Well, I mean, he did technically, I guess, beat Anakin, but still, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, kind of riding a lot on this kid. I'm just saying, this
Yeah.
plan maybe hasn't been thought all the way through.
Well, how strong do you think I am? That's
Well,
that's what I was
the
thinking.
thing
Like,
is, and this has always bothered me about it too, it's like the entire fate of the universe is like the whole thing that Lucas always said was that Leia was actually their first choice.
hmm
But I guess circumstances, they just couldn't do it, or maybe they felt,
it's the will of the Force.
well, I think they also felt that maybe because she was too prominent that Vader would pick up on her suddenly learning the Force or something beyond what
Mm.
she was already using for, diplomatic stuff. But the problem that I have is like, okay, if your thing is like, okay, these guys are our only hope here. It's either they beat the Emperor and Vader, or everybody's just forever subjected to the Empire. Thinking maybe they might want to stack the deck.
Well, I think that's kind of the one. At least Luke has had a previous experience by blowing up the Death Star. Because remember, he was the only one pretty much left, and he blew up the Death Star.
Yeah.
The fate of the galaxy was pretty much was. I mean, the whole rebellion was on this kid's
Well, I'm not
shoulders.
saying that that he himself doesn't feel that weight. And I mean, you get it. I mean,
Oh
ultimately it's like a
no.
family drama. I'm just saying that if I'm Yoda and Obi-Wan,
Hmm.
because again, this goes back to something we talked about before too. Yoda and Obi-Wan handled it all wrong, even in Revenge of the Sith. They both should have gone to face Anakin, wiped him out, and then both should have gone to face the Emperor. But
True.
and it again, I'm just saying, like the whole fate of the galaxy is in the hands of, it's like, okay, this is our shot. Then it wasn't exactly handled with the most,
Strategic
yeah,
plan.
exactly. I mean, it was almost like they were making it up as they went along in some cases, and it's just like, I mean, granted, sure, a lot of these characters weren't created till after the fact, but I'm thinking, it's just like, I know they had to have
See,
felt Ahsoka's presence.
well, I think that's also just the whole that goes into the whole belief in the force system. Like if you're gonna believe in it, you got to believe in it. It's
Well,
kind of like
okay,
how
if the Force
you
is
know.
saying, "Hey, the kid has to go and do this by himself, can't have any help," okay, fine, I'll go along with that as an
Yeah.
explanation. I don't know if
Or I
that's
mean,
the explanation because I
well,
you
I'm just saying, like even having that ace in the hole, though, it's like okay, if Yoda, I mean, if uh uh apparently Scooby Doo, but no, apparently uh uh, if Luke was to fail, were to fail, at least you have the ace in the hole with Leia. Like, okay, we now maybe have to correct it. Like, we know, okay, it's almost kind of like throwing that bait out there, and it's like, okay, what would they do if this person showed up? Okay, this is their hand that they're gonna play. So we have another one in the hole that they don't know about. We can kind of train her up, and then she can go up there, and she will be literally the last hope. But
well, I just think if they train them both together though, and they went
true,
together, that would maybe heighten their chances. Because look, if they haven't said it, they should have at least. I'm sure he thought it. Because Luke, like, okay, he defeats the Emperor and Vader. Now he's going. Now all of a sudden, all these Jedi are popping up at him, and I'm sure he's like, "Where were you?" you know. Oh, hi, I am Ahsoka. I actually,
yeah.
I'm your father's like apprentice or whatever.
Padawan, yeah, and let alone that, it's like, okay, you're not just any like Padawan. You're my thought. Like, I really could have used your help
It's
here,
like, yeah,
genius.
exactly. It's like,
Like
okay,
of
that
all the
means you're
people,
probably
you're the one.
supremely, yeah, you're supremely powerful, which means you would have been a really big help to me.
Not only are you supremely powerful, but you know him from like both sides. You've actually been his Padawan, and you've actually gone up against him as Vader. So like, you
I mean,
really
just Ahsoka
know
by
what I'm up
herself.
against.
But then there's like
Yeah.
other ones that, have kind of popped up, and you're just like, okay, it's only been like 3 years since I pulled this off. Where was everybody then?
Yeah.
I mean, it just because wouldn't it be cool if we all could have gone up against them? I'm just saying.
Right. I would have been fricasseed halfway to death.
Right. I mean, granted, mission accomplished. I mean,
Right.
things still happen.
However,
Fortunately, my dad had a change of heart because if he hadn't, I would have been toast.
literally.
But yes, but just saying, might have gone a little smoother if I could have had the help of all these people. Because, Luke, the other thing that he was probably thinking too, after he was dead, when Rey's like, going up against Palpatine, and it's just like all these like Jedi are coming out to encourage her. It's like, well, where were all your voices when I was going up against them?
Exactly.
It's like, hey, you guys are strangely, eerily silent when I was going up against Palpatine. What's up with that?
Oh, because it's a girl. See?
Right,
Mhm.
right, exactly. All right, and then of course, yeah, we have of our Chris Song of the Force. All right, that's very unique. I would actually still argue this is probably the most unique
Yeah.
of all these powers, even though, granted, they're unique. This one is really inventive. And then, of course, back to number one, right? We have force psychometry. So that
Hmm.
one's that one's kind of like a. I mean, I guess it's a unique thing when you're thinking of force powers, but this is something that we have seen in other franchises before. Where somebody touches something and they can get. I mean, I don't even know why this popped in my head, but the '80s series, The Greatest American Hero, that was something that Ralph was able to do. He'd take like a piece of somebody's clothing and he can kind of see where they were, or get a memory from them. So, I mean, this is something that's been used, and all they've done was more or less appropriated for like the Force. But again, I think that what they're talking about in this list is probably like, okay, of all the Jedi, I don't even think they're covering the Sith much in this, but of all the Jedi, not too many people are using these five powers. That's what it seems like where it's going to me.
Yeah, pretty much. And just, we covered it. I gotta find that list, but there's a litany of other force powers that are out there, but these are the ones that um have been used so far. And I'm sure they'll the question is, do we need to see more, or do, like you said, I think you make a very valid point. It's like expound or master the ones that we've already been given. You might be able to present one or two, maybe three new force powers here and there, as the years go on. But don't try to dump, because then you, like Ted said, you have way too many um almost like godlike situations. And then it's kind of hard to kind of keep up with what these characters can do, because now you run into the whole Superman problem.
Well, not only that, but something else I brought up at the beginning of the show. You also have the problem is that once you put a force power in there, now you got to explain why the Jedi aren't using this in a lot of situations where they should be. I brought up force speed. We saw that little force speed thing in the Phantom Menace. I'm like, well, I could think of like 10 other times in the franchise, like even in the original trilogy alone, that might have come in handy. Like you
Yeah.
probably would have used it. Like if this were real life, you would 100%
Hmm.
use this power. But because it doesn't go along with the storytelling, yeah, we're gonna conveniently not have the Jedi use it, or kind of like what you brought up when you first got on. Okay, you got the power that you could just blow away entire troops, like battalions of
Hmm.
troops. Well, I would think you would use that a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, you can make the argument. This is what I said at the beginning of the show. You can make the argument that, well, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of force power to do, right? And you got to temper the powers that you use, because you have to keep in mind you have to last throughout whatever this battle is, and if you tax yourself too early,
Yeah.
you run the risk of defeat or whatever. So granted,
Yeah.
I get it. I just played devil's advocate to my own argument, but still, I'm thinking though, in some cases, you probably would have used something like force speed, and it didn't seem like it taxed them that much. And I'm not saying you got to run like 50 miles either. You just get yourself out of immediate danger.
Hmm.
So there's things like that. That's the problem too, where when you start to bring in too many different powers, well, now these guys have more things at their disposal, and now you gotta somewhat, you either have to ignore them for the sake of your story, or you have to explain, well, why aren't they using them, or hope the audience forgot about it.
Right.
Which the hardcore Star Wars fans, yeah, we're not forgetting about it.
Mm-mm.
So I mean, that was cool though. I mean, I really like this. Now next time, I've already started working on the show. It's
Okay.
it's basically like a Sith matchup that could happen, Maul versus Vader. And it's like
Mm.
there's like a
Yeah.
possibility that you
Yeah.
can, I guess, there's some way, probably with the Darth Maul underworld thing, maybe that's where
Hmm. Yeah,
it's
that's
going
where it
with
comes
that.
from.
Okay, because
Yep.
I hadn't like fully read it. I just started putting the show together. So the only reason why I didn't put it fully up is because I didn't want it to, people are looking at it like, oh wait, what are we seeing? So, but probably at some point this week, watch for it. You guys will see the notification about that. And speaking of which, if you guys haven't done so already, don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. You saw what happened today. We had to move it to 9, and then really, I guess we should have moved it to 10. I saw the text like halfway through, like that, your phone was off or whatever, and you're just kind of like, oh, we can make it to 10. And I'm like, I wish I had seen that before, because
yeah,
it took me a minute. It took me a minute to like warm into it, man. I was so discombobulated at the beginning of the show. Like, I mean, the funny thing is, I could see either getting a lot of dislikes or people just going, I don't know, I don't think this is going to be a good one, and come off of it before we actually got into the real, discussion of it. But, well, at least you were able to, join in on the conversation, and we got a good, like 40 minutes or something, actually. So that was cool. All right, well, with that, I guess until next week, watch for this little Sith battle thing, because I think you guys are really going to enjoy that one. I think it's going to be a really good topic, and it's going to be fun for us to discuss. So with that, thankfully, I don't have to do this one on my own. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.